Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this local review body for the 20th of November 2022. I am the convener of the body. I'm Councillor Bob Braun. I have with me this morning two other councillors. On my left, Councillor Hugh Anderson, and my right, Councillor Richard Waters. We are all members of the Planning and Placemaking Committee for the Council, as required by this body. I may also introduce the other members of the top table here. To my far right is Mr. Ross Burton. He's a planning advisor to the LRB, and he is not part of the planning department and had no previous involvement with any of these applications this morning. And his involvement only comes about because they appealed to this body. To my far left is Mr. Colin Elliott, who is our legal advisor this morning, and his left, Ms. Jessica Guild, who is from Committee Services. I would mention up front that of the 6 applications this morning, the last one, that's 513, has been withdrawn because we need further information, and that information is not available to us at this time. It shouldn't actually have been on the agenda. I think it's too early to come back to us. Members, then we move on to the agenda. Can I ask, are there any declarations of interest this morning? Councillor Anderson.
Sorry. It's quite interesting. This development covers a little bit of area. Sorry.
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. We're not on that yet. Sorry.
Councillor Waters, any interest?
No declaration of interest.
Thank you very much. Next item is the minutes from the previous meeting. As I'm the only member who was here, I can agree the minutes on this occasion. So we now proceed to the first paper this morning, which is item 5.1. Sorry, item 4.1. I beg, counting myself further forward. Item 4.1. This is the erection of a dwelling house, land 90 metres northeast of Craig North House, Lathock. I hope that's how you pronounce it. May I ask Mr. Burton if you would introduce the case for us?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take you through the pictures. First, the photographs is for the applications for the erection of a house in a site in the green belt. You can see it on the screen in front. There's a red. It's outlined in red there. You can see where it is. It's a fair distance from any development. That's you can just see a bit of Perth in the top left of the picture there. Next slide, please. Some more detail of the site. Now the site is the grey site there. The blue line shows the other land owned by the applicant. But so the application site is the grey rectangle to the right hand side. Next slide, please. Looking at the access road, you can just see on the left hand side of the picture there a part of the gate post, if you like, the entrance to the site. Next slide. And the access road in the other direction. The wall that you see to the right is the wall of another property. Next slide, please. And looking at the site from the side across an adjacent agricultural unit, the lighter coloured building you can see there is the mobile home that currently occupies the site. Next slide, please. And looking at the site from the road, you're looking straight at the mobile home with a shed garage behind, with a van you can see parked in the garage. Next slide, please. Looking inside the site, you can see there's a line of garage sheds behind the mobile home and a shed on the right hand side, and the area to the front is parking and amenity space. Next slide, please. And if you can see beyond the site, you can see the gable of the closest house. There's an adjacent green area which is owned by the applicant. Just to the left of the tall hedge that you can see, and the house is beyond that. The neighbouring house is beyond that. Next slide, please. And looking, this is the rear of the mobile home, and you can see the adjacent the neighbouring house across the field in the picture as well. Next slide, please. And this is looking down towards the road from the area to the rear of the house. The applicant runs a roofing business, I understand, and the yard area to the rear of the house looks to be used for that purpose. Next slide, please. Okay, we're back to the aerial picture. So the proposal is for a 1.5 story, 4-bedroom house on the part of the site currently occupied by the mobile home. The proposed house would be finished in green rough cast with a slate roof. There would be an integral double garage to the side and a large decking area to the rear. The existing shed to the rear of the garden would remain. The site has a planning history of in 2012, an application for a house and garage was refused. In 2015, an application for a house and garage was again refused. And in 2017, an application for the siting of the residential caravan was refused. An enforcement notice was served by the council requiring removal of the mobile home in 2018. And that enforcement notice was appealed against, which was the appeal was determined by the government's DPEA. The appeal was dismissed and has not, as you can see from the pictures, been complied with. So to summarise the applicant's case, the applicant has lived on the site with his family for 4 years. He inherited it from his father in 2017 and started using the site as a depot for his roofing business. He started living on site without consent in a caravan, which he replaced in 2018 with a mobile home. The applicant states he wasn't aware that the residential use on site required planning permission. The council served an enforcement notice in June 2021 seeking the removal of the mobile home, which is incompatible with the authorised use of the site for storage and distribution. An appeal against the enforcement notice was upheld. The current application was then submitted with a view to providing a more suitable home for the applicant and his family. The proposed house will enhance an established commercial site within the Greenbelt. Its position within the site responds to the adjacent house to the south. The house is required to ensure on-site security for the business. The applicant has 7 subcontractors employed on a full-time basis and significant value in the tools stored on site. The applicant only works seasonally, also works seasonally locally for farmers supervising stock. The proposed house therefore meets 2 requirements of Policy 43 Greenbelts. A, that it supports an established business which has a relationship with the land, and B, that it supports an agricultural worker. To summarise the Council's report of handling, the material policies in the Local Development Plan are 1A and 1B, placemaking, Policy 5, infrastructure contributions, Policy 19, housing in the countryside, and Policy 43, Greenbelt. The site is located in Greenbelt, so Policy 43 is most relevant. Criterion A of that policy allows for development which supports an established use or new business which has a direct relationship with the land. The applicant runs a roofing business from the site, which is not a use which has a direct relationship with the land. So the proposal does not comply with Criterion A. Criterion B allows for development which is essential for agriculture. This is further assessed under Category 3.3 of the relevant supplementary guidance, new house to support an existing business, farm workers. The applicant has worked on 2 nearby farms supervising stock, particularly during lambing season, but the information provided is not sufficient to show that an additional full-time worker is essential to the continued operation of either farm, as the guidance requires. The proposal does not therefore comply with Category B of the policy. Criterion E of the policy allows for new houses in the Greenbelt which comply with Category 4 or 5 of the Housing in the Countryside policy. It's acknowledged that there's a mobile home on the site, but it's unauthorised and has been the subject of enforcement action. The proposal is not compliant with the criteria E of Policy 43, so is considered contrary to that policy. There are no issues with the design and siting of the house in terms of impact on the character and amenity of the area or residential amenity, but this does not overcome the fact that the proposal is contrary to the Local Development Plan's Greenbelt policy. Representations, there were no public representations received. And material considerations, the case officer's assessment of the most relevant local development policy is correct. As the site is within the Greenbelt, policy 43 is the most relevant. It's also a material consideration that the mobile home in the site is unauthorised and has been the subject of enforcement action which would see it removed. Some observations on the proposal. The site would appear to have an established use of storage and distribution, but the history of residential use is more recent and is unauthorised despite a number of applications for residential use and an unsuccessful appeal against the most recent action by the council and the enforcement notice requiring the removal of the mobile home. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. I'll open to questions. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Just there seems to be, I mean, the main policy that seems to be considered here is policy 43, which is to do with the green belt. Just regarding part A of that policy, where it can be demonstrated that the development either supports an established use or develops a new business within the green belt, which has a direct relationship to the land. Given that there I think an acceptance with from an officer perspective that there has been a business there, I think for 18, 19 years, I think it is now, in there. Does that, and I know the applicants have kindly raised the idea of security for that business with their storage. Is there any, within that policy there, is it fair to make that assessment or that need that there is need for a house, which is what the application is for there, and the bit I struggle with is just the fact that there is, we've accepted that there is a business there, so it obviously has needs, but at the same time, I think on your thing you're saying there's no relationship with that business with the land, and I'm kind of trying to marry the two bits together to try and understand it. Thank you.
Yeah, the handling report makes the point that the roofing business that's on site has no direct relationship to the land. Now, policy 43 criterion A says it can be permitted where it meets following criteria. A, it can be demonstrated that the development either supports an established use or develops a new business within the Greenbelt, which has a direct relationship to the land. So there is an established use. The applicant's reason, one of the applicant's reasons for seeking this review is that the house would support that established use. The use as a roofing business does not have a direct relationship to the land, however. So the assessment of the case officer is that it doesn't meet that criteria.
Right. There seem to be two conflicting. Is that open to interpretation then, or am I over reading into that? Is there, if the applicant, and again they've mentioned from the security perspective of the roofing business, would they have to demonstrate that in a different way, or is there? Understand.
Yeah, that is it's a perfectly valid point you make, councillor, and that is the decision which the committee needs to take today, whether the committee considers that supporting the business that's on site is sufficient to or meets that criteria, and therefore complies with the policy. And yes, much of planning is about judgment, and if the committee makes a certain judgment, then they must go along with that judgment, and how it then applies to the policy.
Thank you, Convener. Just to come in and from my experience of dealing with ones in the past, and a direct answer to your question, Councillor Waters, I'm aware that in the past on security issues there has been sometimes some information or reports provided indicating, whether there's been crime in the area, etc., and what the security needs are. But in fairness, the policy doesn't actually directly require that. So it is ultimately for you to decide. Yes, there is an established use. There's two different things here. There's an established use on the ground, that is correct. But the policy goes beyond that. The policy says that the established use or develops a new business within the Greenbelt, which has a direct relationship with the land. So the focus is what is the relationship with the land for the proposal in front of you.
I want to try and keep this to not debate, but more questions. But the it's the relationship. We have already accepted that there is an established business there. I don't think there's any question about that. So does that not make the part on being the relationship with the land irrelevant because there's already one there? Is it the formation of the building? Is it the formation of the I'm just trying to understand it, and not just is the formation of the business in relation to policy 43 is already there. So I'm trying to understand. Then surely the direct relationship with the land becomes slightly irrelevant. Is it irrelevant, or am I misreading something within the policy or the criteria? And I understand your answer there, that's for us to determine, but just to make sure that I am fully understanding this and not misinterpreting it. Thank you.
No, it's the difficulty is it's slightly more complex because you do have an established use. So it is more complex in the circumstance, but it does not mean to say that established use automatically, because there is an established use, it automatically means it has a relationship with the land in terms of the policy. That is something you have to assess. And remember, it's not just, you have to look at the proposal. The proposal is for a dwelling house to allow for oversight of what of that particular business. So you're looking at the nature of the business as well, and the dwelling house and the need for that. So it's bringing the different elements together. The complicating factor here is, there is an established use. If it was a new use, it would be nice and clean, and you wouldn't have this extra bit for every interpretation. But I would agree with Mr. Burton that ultimately it's for you to consider that in line with the policy. But it's not automatic. You have to consider what that relationship is.
Councillor Anderson, any question?
Just a question just was discussed just now. The use of the land just now, it bears no relation to what we have in front of us today. The approval, looking for approval for a dwelling house on site, and what the history of living on this site seems to be a bit checkered as such, because I don't think before the applicant inherited whether there was anyone living on that site before, whether temporary or some permanency. As a first application to live on the site, such as a caravan of some sort, and that was refused by the council as such. And it was upgraded to probably a more permanent unit. Is that correct? And what we see on site now, and that was refused. And I got an enforcement notice in place to have that unit, living not being refused on it and removed from the site.
Yes, I understand that is the case, Councillor, that the first residential use, it looks as if it was in, looking back at the applicant's case and the report of handling, it looks to me as if the residential use started in 2017 or 2018. No, 2017, sorry. And there was no residential use before that. It was just used as a depot.
Yeah, and as I say, subsequent to that, it's been refuse an enforcement notice to have that not lived in, to have it removed from the site possibly, and no residential use being allowed on the site to comply with the policy in that area, being green belt, etc.
Yes, I think what you're looking at here is the background and the context in which you're looking at. It is correct, there have been other procedure before. There was an enforcement notice served and it was appealed, and the essential elements in the appeal that you're looking at today is the residential element. The appeal was refused in that respect. So essentially that current residential use is unauthorised. And may be subject to action at a later point. But you're then assessing that in accordance with this current application, because this application comes after the appeal, and they're asking you, or you're being asked today by the applicant to consider granting a residential house. The enforcement notice aspects are part of the background and part of your consideration, but probably, I would say the most important aspects is, I think, started out at the very beginning, you say is policy 43 in the Greenbelt policy. That's what you're coming back to.
I have no questions myself. They've been asked already. So we'll go to a preliminary decision, members. Can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor. Or do we require any further information? Councillor Waters.
Happy to proceed.
Councillor Anderson.
Happy to proceed.
And I too am happy to proceed at this stage. So this is a difficult case. A lot of paperwork here to read through, but the central core of this is policy 43, which deals with greenbelt land, and obviously the protection of greenbelt land, which is understandable. All the policies, obviously, as it says, relate, almost all of them, to land-related business, and we have that policy clearly in this pack. Assessing this really, in fairness, one have to say, in my opinion, a roofing business has no link to the land at all. It is a business separate to that. I know the appeal documentation talks of working on local farms, which is fair enough, but to support that, we would have to have a business plan to indicate why that work is necessary, and we haven't got that. There's also an indication the farmlands themselves are more than 3 miles away, which doesn't seem to link the property to the work. We've also had assessment that we are looking at possibly replacing the existing building, but the building itself has no planning permission and therefore doesn't exist as far as planning is concerned, and therefore cannot be replaced. As difficult as it may seem, I know to the applicants, I'm afraid on this occasion I feel that I have to reject the appeal and stick with the decision of the planning officer. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. I accept most of what you're saying. Where you know, my questioning very much backs this up. You know, the idea of a business and its connection or relationship with the land, once it's established, the business is there, which is totally accepted, I think, across the board. Then is there the right to, or the need, or does that fulfil the requirements, policy 43, which again I agree comes down to the real question regarding policy here, regarding security stuff, and I, you know, Colin Elliott's response here, that often you would go off and get some report what crime in the area is and stuff, but having been a councillor for 5 years in a reasonably rural area, I know a lot of thefts in the countryside are opportunistic. Try and say that out. So So based on that, I would go for acceptance of or overturn the refusal, based on policy 43A and the fact that, you know, the business is already established. So, you know, linking it into the security, unless Mr. Elliott wants to say that I'm misreading something drastically and I'm within policy with saying that. I'm quite happy with that.
Mr. Elliott, should we wait to see Councillor Anderson first? Yeah, okay. Councillor Anderson, your thoughts?
Yes, I'm concerned about this. It's policy 43 is the important one that I go by. Security aspect of it, I'm not sure if there's power on site, but one could set up certain cameras and have the site monitored wherever the applicants reside. They could bring it back to their home somewhere, but not to be built on this site. And I second my convener, and that's saying it should be refused.
So, Mr. Elliott, we have a 2-to-1 answer here.
Yes, Convener, I think it's quite clear that there's a 2-to-1 majority to refuse in line with the same reasons given by the appointed officer.
I know the applicant said, I'm sorry that there's not the decision you wanted, but we have to go by the policies we have in front of us. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next paper, which is item 4.2. This relates to alterations, formation of a balcony and external stairs at Baldsay, Perth Road in Blairgowrie. Mr. Burton, if you could introduce for us.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, the application is for the formation of a balcony and external stairs to the rear of a substantial 2-storey detached house in Valsday Road, Perth Road, Rogsnothy, Perth Road, Blairgowrie, pardon me. I'll take you through the photographs first. I will say that you can see the subject there outlined in red. You can see that at the foot of the rear garden on the left-hand side of the picture, there is another 2 roofs. In fact, that's a bungalow with a carport to the side, which are built at the bottom of the back garden of the application property. Next slide, please. That's the house from the main road. And next slide, please. Now, these pictures are taken from the applicant's neighbour's garden, who kindly allowed me access into their garden as the applicants weren't present when I called, so I wasn't able to get anybody's permission to enter the rear garden. They do, however, show the aspect which would be affected by the actual balcony. That's the rear of the house you're looking at, the white building, and you can see a grey sort of part of the rear wall. That's above a new window or door rather that's been installed to the rear of the house. The balcony would be just on this side of that grey area, and it would be accessed from the room which has the windows on the second floor, on the upper floor, which are closest to the camera. Next slide, please. That's looking into the garden from the neighbour's property. Again, you can see the new doors that have been installed, and as I say, the balcony would be just to the left of these doors. Next slide, please. And that's a clearer view of the house itself. The 2 windows the window to the left-hand side is the study room, which would be from which the which the balcony would be off. There would be a door formed in that next to that window to give access to the balcony, and there would also be a spiral stair leading up to the balcony directly from the garden. Next slide, please. And that's looking down towards the rear of the garden. You can see fairly heavy shrubbery and hedging between that and the house to the rear. Next slide, please. That is the carport of the house that's been built at the bottom of the garden. Next slide, please. And then back to the original slide. There are papers. There are useful pictures in the papers in front of you which show the views from the study window. We're on page. I can't recall the page. Yes, yeah, and they give a good view of the view from that window. It does include zoom shots, if you like, which show quite well what the view would be like from the balcony to the house at the bottom of the garden. So the balcony would be 4 meters in width and 2 meters deep. It would be accessed from a small room currently used as a study on the upper floor of the house. The house has another 4 bedrooms, bathroom and shower room upstairs, and a dining kitchen area, lounge and sitting room at ground level. The balcony would have a low glass balustrade with chrome posts. The rear garden is approximately 50 meters long, and a single-storey house has been built immediately adjacent to the rear garden boundary. To summarise the applicant's case, views from the proposed balcony to the rear gardens of the 2 properties to the side, to the north and south, would be impeded by the applicant's garage and by trees and fencing. The balcony would be 15 meters away from the windows of the house adjacent to the rear boundary, over the recommended 9 meters. Other larger balconies have been granted with screening. A screening condition would be acceptable here. To summarise the report of handling, the principal local development plan policies are placemaking, policies 1A and B, and residential areas, policy 17. The introduction of an external platform with unhindered 180-degree views over the surrounding area is deemed invasive and impressive. The balcony would be less than 9 meters from the boundaries of the gardens to the side and would exacerbate the potential to overlook the bungalow close to the rear boundary. The placemaking guide states that balconies will be resisted where they would diminish the privacy of neighbouring houses and gardens. The proposed balcony would have an adverse overlooking impact on neighbouring properties to the detriment of their residential amenity. Representations. One public representation was received from the owner of the house to the rear of the application property on the grounds that the balcony would look directly into 3 rooms, the kitchen, bathroom and bedroom, and the front door of the property. It's also noted that fences are removable protections. Material considerations. The local development plan policies on placemaking and the supplementary guidance, the placemaking guide, are the most relevant policy considerations. Of the grounds of objection, overlooking and residential amenity is a material consideration. Some observations on the proposal. The applicant's agent quotes the 9 meters mentioned in the guide for minimum distances from windows of habitable rooms to boundaries. This does not apply for window to window distances or the distance from balconies to the windows of habitable rooms in neighbouring houses. The windows of the application property are currently approximately 18 meters from the windows of the boundary to the rear, the bungalow to the rear, pardon me. The balcony would reduce that to about 50 meters. So somebody standing on the balcony would be about 50 meters from the windows of the neighbouring house at the rear of the garden. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Could I ask Councillor Anderson, do you have any questions?
Yes, the important factor in this one is the distances and the elevation of the balcony, especially going to the bedrooms to the rear property. The distances on that, it's on the margin, isn't it, if it's not? Or off it anyway.
I would suggest you're correct, Councillor. Currently there's 18 meters between these windows, the windows of the habitable rooms. The most important one in the bungalow to the rear is the bedroom window, and I think page 187 of your papers shows a zoom lens view from the upper floor to that, because the fence is there, but because of the elevation, you can see quite clearly the window of a bedroom there. The balcony, the addition of the balcony would enable somebody standing on the balcony to be about 50 metres away from that window. And while it's not enshrined in the local development plan, planning authorities generally look for 18-metre distances between the windows of habitable rooms, and that would apply to a balcony as well.
I say the neighbouring properties either side of it, it will be critical and set up. Looking in the privacy of the rear gardens are going to be affected on either side.
Indeed, and you can see from the picture on the screen that there are buildings, so some buildings which would impede the house. To the south, and at the bottom of the picture there, has a garage which would impede some of the view from the balcony. The house on the other side, which is the garden where I took my photographs from, would be impeded by a fence and planting only, which, as the applicants, as the objector points out, is not a permanent. Neither is a permanent construction.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. I think Councillor Anderson has really got to the nib of the issues here, and I don't really have any other questions that haven't been asked.
Just a couple, Mr. Burton, on the on that plan we have, and also I think in the photographs, there seemed to be more planting or growth around that fence line to the bungalow, more so than what we seem to see in the pictures. I just wonder, is there more there than what we see now? Or it does seem quite a bit there on that photograph, on the left-hand side of the square, where the bungalow is.
There does. The zoom lens view, the pictures that we have taken from inside the house are submitted by the applicant. I don't know when they were taken. I would assume I would have assumed that they showed the position as it is now, but perhaps not. Certainly, one of my pictures shows the. If you could run through to one of the, I think the second last slide, please. That shows an oblique view of that boundary. Yeah, that's showing an oblique view to that boundary, which also takes in some of the planting in the neighbour's garden that I'm standing in. So it's not a great view of that. It's also at ground level. The pictures you have on page 187 and previous pages are taken from the upper level. So I wasn't able to gain access to the house to take a view from that window. So.
And just the other point was the windows at the back of the house already, which I think is the study, which these photographs are taken from, already overlook into that bedroom. Then is that?
They do. The study window is 18 metres from the window of the adjacent house, which, if we were looking at a new build housing estate, would be acceptable.
Thank you very much. So I have no further questions. So members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor. Or do we require more information? Councillor Anderson.
I'm happy with the information.
And Councillor Waters.
Happy to proceed.
And I too am happy to proceed. So could I ask Councillor Anderson if you could lead off on this one?
Well, I would move refusal of the application because I feel that privacy is strictly should be enforced. It's probably something that's going to happen more and more, that people's privacy is going to be affected by, in not this sense, but in this essence in front of us here, it's quite obvious that it does affect two adjacent properties quite clearly. And distances have been, that are usually standard, are being affected. So I would move a refusal of the application.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Yes, I'm happy to accept the reasons for refusal given by officers on this one. The elevated balcony does affect the amenity of the cottage, the bungalow at the back of the garden, but also I would agree with Councillor Anderson that it also affects the amenity of the two adjacent properties on the either side. So happy to with the reasons of refusal given by officers. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Given the decision at the moment, my view, I suppose, doesn't really come to it much, but I would have to agree. I think visual amenity is the main point here, and the balcony itself would cause overlooking into the bungalow at the rear. I suppose one could talk about some sort of privacy screen on the balcony, but that would defeat the whole object of having a balcony to sit on. So on this occasion, I think I would concur with the two of you that we have to uphold the decision by officers on this occasion. Mr. Elliott, we have a unanimous decision on this one.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I think there's nothing really to add, that by unanimous decision refused in line with the appointed officer's reasons for refusal. Okay.
Thank you, members. So we'll now move on to the next paper, which is number 4.3. This is the erection of beauty treatment building to form extension to existing Class 2 business and associated works at 2 Errol Road in Bagari. Mr. Burton.
Thank you, Chair. As ever, I'll take you through the photographs first. We're looking here not at a refusal, but to challenge a single condition attached to a consent. So the first picture shows the aerial shot. Now the extension, which has consent, the building is on the corner of Main Street and Errol Road, and the extension is on the Main Street side. It's on the left-hand side of the building, looking at the photograph on the screen there. Beyond that, on the left is an A-listed church. There's a wall, a substantial wall, I think 2 meters high from memory, between the application site and the church lands. Next slide, please. That's looking at the building from the corner. The main entrance to the building is on the left-hand side of the two-storey element there on Errol Road itself. Next slide, please. And this is looking at the application site. The new building which is proposed would go in the area to the right of the house. It would be linked to and lower than the single-storey element you can see the car parked in front of there, and would occupy a fair bit of that garden up to the wall. Next slide, please. That's a more oblique view of the site, and that's looking towards the church, which is the neighbouring property. So the new building would be behind where you can see the bin, the wheelie bin standing. Next slide, please. And this is in the driveway of the site. That single-storey building is what the new building will be attached to, and it would extend into the garden area on the other side of the path and beyond the planting there. Next slide, please. That's looking at the side of the building. That is where that gable is where the new building would be attached. Next slide, please. And this is standing looking into the area, the garden area, which would which the building would be situated in. There would be a gap on the Main Street is to the right hand side of this picture, and there would be a gap with trees between the building and that street. It would be fairly close to the wall that you can see at the far side of the garden. Next slide, please. And this is looking towards the church, so you can see the height of the wall. It wouldn't be as high as the building itself, but the building is single story with a flat roof, so it wouldn't be very much above that. Next slide, please. And this is looking at the wall as well. You can get a better view of the wall itself from this picture. Next slide, please. That's back to the aerial shot. So consent was granted in July this year for a single-storey extension to the former house, which is now used as a beauty salon. The proposal was accepted in terms of its principal design and layout, but a condition was attached to amend the proposed cladding, which is smooth black fibre cement vertical cladding boards with timber cladding, and to replace the proposed roof, which is a single ply membrane black with a sedum green roof. What the committee might find useful is, while I'm outlining the cases, page 249, 248 and 249, but 249 in particular, show an artist's impression of the building as proposed, which will give you a useful view while I run through the applicant's case. The applicant's case is summarised as no discussion was entered into between the case officer and agents or applicants regarding the suitability of materials, so the condition amending them, which amounts to a material change in the proposal, was imposed without the council appreciating the design and costing process that led to the original proposal. The cost of changing to a sedum roof is significantly greater than the cost of the roof as proposed, so much so that it might make the project unviable. The roof covering is largely hidden from view, so the change will not make an appreciable difference to the appearance of the extension. The timber cladding that the new condition requires is not compatible with building standard regulations due to the inflammability of timber and its proximity to the application site boundary. The maintenance requirements of timber cladding are greater than those for fibre cement cladding, which would give rise to additional costs and possibly loss of business if the extension had to be closed when maintenance took place. Parts of the external walls will also be difficult to access and therefore to maintain. The fibre cement boards proposed would have a similar appearance to timber cladding and would have none of the maintenance or inflammability issues associated with timber cladding. To summarise the report of handling, the application property is listed, category C, and the adjacent church is A listed. The design and layout of any extension should ensure the character and setting of these buildings is not compromised, as required by policy 27A of the local development plan. The proposed design is of high quality. The contemporary approach identifies a clear delineation between the traditional building and the more modern proposal, while complementing each other. The setback of the building from the established building line also helps to minimise the overall impact on the application property, which is C listed, and the conservation area. The proposed building is not considered to impact on the setting of the adjacent A-listed church. The proposal does not interrupt the visual relationship between the schoolhouse and the A-listed church to the west, given the setback which had been a concern on previous proposals for this site. Given the sensitive setting, however, it would be appropriate to use natural, sustainable materials for external finishes, such as a green roof and natural timber cladding, rather than the proposed fibre cement cladding. With this amendment, the proposal is considered to comply with the local development plan. Given the location of the property and the availability of good transport links and locally available parking, the parking requirements of the proposed use are also considered to be acceptable. One objection to the application was received on the grounds of insufficient parking for customers of the business. Material considerations. Policy 27A of the local development plan listed buildings is a material consideration. Also material is policy 28A, new development and conservation areas, although this is not mentioned in the handling report. The objection on parking is not material to the determination of this review, as a condition which is being reviewed, condition 5, is solely to do with materials to be used. Observations. The only aspect that should properly be considered today is the visual impact on the proposed extension in the context of the C-listed building it will be attached to and the A-listed church, which is the other side of the boundary wall. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Councillor Waters, any questions?
Thank you, convener. Just regarding the from a conservation perspective and the sedum or similar, I think the application is roof. The applicant said there's no discussions in that, but reading the policy, there seems to be, you know, room for discussions. And also there's a memorandum or a letter in the papers that comes in where the conservation officer says a green roof. You know, green can be green as in a colour. Green can be environmentally green, as in a sedum roof, and the interpretation by the deciding officer is obviously, and I'm not sure how in concrete this is, and that's what I want to understand is the sedum roof and kind of a concrete condition. Or is there room for discussions within the current condition to allow officers or the applicant to come up with a different proposal that would be acceptable to officers? Thank you.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, Councillor, and the memo from conservation wasn't entirely clear on that point, but it has been taken as meaning a living roof, a green roof, in terms of as a sedum roof or other type of material. I think that's what meant by or similar. So a sedum roof is one option for a kind of living roof with a growing material on it. Other ones are what's called a growing roof, which can have other growing materials, which is heavier, which is more expensive than a sedum roof because it's heavier. So it's more difficult to incorporate within a design in terms of structural stability. And I think that what the actual condition requires is it says I'm just trying to find the condition in my papers here. 226. Thank you. Yeah, it says the roof shall have a sedum green roof or similar. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I think that's what's meant by similar to sedum green roof. But you're quite right, there is a degree of clarity that might have been useful there.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson?
My concerns about this new project as such is that it's listed so close to a listed building that it's completely different. It's right up to the modern style. It's quite a contrast to the existing listed building. The rear wall of it is off the new build is so close to the existing wall. The maintenance of that existing build, there'll be certain limitations of construction. I would think that's probably why they've gone for the sheeting along that wall, so minimum maintenance rather than put a brick built something which would need minimal maintenance. The roof structure as such green. Flat roofs, I don't particularly like flat roofs, but that's nothing to do with planning. But a slight any elevation on that roof instead of flat would make it more visible from the neighbour over the wall, because it's just really up to wall height. It's just about wall height just now, but any height would make it much more visible. That's my objections. I say colour is another factor.
Do we have a question, Councillor Anderson? That's one at the moment.
Well, I'm just going to say that the options that it's. I have concerns about it. That's all.
Any comment there?
I would agree with you, Councillor, about the flat roof. I think that was probably arrived at in order to minimise the visual impact because it is in a sensitive location. And I think what you're saying about maintenance is interesting as well, because I do think that had this been discussed between the case officer and the applicant, then these could have been agreed, ironed out before, and perhaps not come to this committee.
I myself, Mr. Bowman, one question that was looking at the drawings here and your photographs. I'm assuming that the extension can only really be seen from the gap where the parking is. The rest of it's hidden by trees or by the walls.
I think they'll still be aware of it from the front, from Main Street, but not very aware because there's planting there. There's a wall. There's a fence on top of the wall. You'll see it from when you pass along the road, if you like, through the gap for the driveway. But it won't be something, I don't think, that will be in your face on Main as you go along Main Street, and you won't see it at all from Errol Road.
Sorry.
May help members is just to encapsulate what this application is about. You have a condition which requires finishing materials to be approved, and a specific mention of a seed and green roof, and also the walls to be clad in natural timber cladding. The applicant is asking you to take that condition away, and what that would mean is you go back to what they've applied for. And Mr. Burton will correct me if I'm wrong, but that's concrete walls and the kind of a sheet roofing is what they're looking for. So your assessment is whether, of course, that is, if you take the condition away and go to what they originally applied for, whether you think that's got an adverse impact or not, particularly in relation to the listed building aspects. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. And so we have no further questions. Members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Waters.
Can I just ask Colin Elliott just a very, or Ross as well, just a very quick question, or advice before I decide what I want to do regarding the sedum roof and the condition which says or similar, you know, sedum green roof or similar, you know, and the ability to look at that I have. Is that condition enough to open up a conversation between officers and the applicant to have a look at other options within there, or would it be more prudent or more advisable to defer this and ask for more information of officers from our perspective, or does the current condition allow enough of a discussion to happen in there?
Mr. Elliott, would you be able to answer that?
Answer that is, I think, first of all, start from what you're looking at. And what you're looking at is there is a condition there. Within that condition, there is some flexibility for discussions, but I'm putting it no higher than that because it does say sedum green roof or similar. It is not talking about sheet cladding. But so there's some scope for discussion there, but you're being asked to remove that, to go back to what was applied for which, as I said earlier on, was the concrete panels, concrete walls, and the kind of sheeting. Now, if you accept the review and remove the condition, you know where you are, because that will be the concrete walls and the sheeting. If you refuse the review, then that would be for the applicant, to the developer, to have discussions with planning to see whether they can comply with condition 5 as currently written. There are other options available, because if they still believe that they cannot comply with that for the reasons I've outlined, then they have other options later on, which is what we call a Section 42 application, not to comply with condition 5 in some way, either completely or in part, or they could complete a completely new planning application. Essentially, your decision today is whether you keep the condition or you remove it and go back to what they originally applied for. So I know I've explained the options that might arrive down the line, but what you have to focus on is keep the condition or not.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm happy to proceed.
Councillor Anderson, are you happy?
Happy to proceed.
Thank you. And I too am happy. So Councillor Waters, can I ask you to lead off on this one?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I'm happy to refuse the review as such and accept the officers on this. It is a conservation zone. I think it's important to protect that, especially with different level of conservation or listed buildings within the vicinity and within the building. And I've fully taken on board the submissions by the applicant, but on this case I have no hesitation in going with the officers and with this condition as part of this application. I do think, as far as the roof goes, there's enough leeway within that condition to give the applicant and officers a chance to discuss and find something in there that's suitable to both. Thank you.
Councillor, as far as I'm concerned, on this occasion, I would concur with you. I think we're dealing with a site which is between two listed buildings. I think we need to reflect the care that's needed for any new structure within that site. And condition 5, as you said, it's reasonably flexible. It says that the roof shall have a sedum green roof or similar. So I think there's room in the condition already for negotiation. So at this stage, I would be happy to leave it in place, refuse the appeal, and stick with what the officers had originally intended. Thank you. And Councillor Anderson.
I would concur with the convener. Further discussions. It's the way out of this one. So I concur with the convener.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. We have a unanimous.
Yes, convener, unanimous decision to refuse the review, and therefore condition 5 remains on the permission.
Thank you. So we now move on to the next paper, which is item 518. This is a paper which was originally was deferred by this body. Has now come back to us. So I'll ask Mr. Burton to introduce. It's the S42 application to delete condition 6 of permission for land 180 metres southwest of Pohill Cottage at Rumbling Bridge. Mr. Burton.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take you through the photographs first. You can see the site there in red. It's a long site which is stretching down from the access driveway, if you like. The access road continues to up to a farm up to the left of the picture there. You can see that on the right hand side of the picture there, it connects to the A977. There's a cottage at the corner there, or just up from the corner rather. The area surrounding the red line there, to the west and the east, is is the site of the large application, which allows for other development. As you'll see from the pictures in a second, a site between the application site and the road is currently being developed as a for a house. Other sites which were granted consent under the original application have not yet started. So next slide, please. That's looking at the main road from the Bellmouth, from the entrance to the site. Next slide, please. And the other direction from the Bellmouth, from the entrance. Next slide, please. So looking at the site, looking at the access road rather, from the main road, you can see there's a kind of parking area with bins on the right hand side, and the access road continues beyond that. Next slide, please. You can see there are gates to the left, and you can see the building just beyond the tree there, which is Powmill Cottage. Next slide, please. And the access road leading up to, or the access, the access leading up to the site. The site is just the site is just before the bend in the road there. Next slide, please. And that's looking into the site itself, which has got open countryside to both sides. The trees that you see to the right hand side there, that is the edge of the larger site, which grants for which planning permission for, I think, 5 houses were granted. Next slide, please. And looking back down the access road, you'll see you can see the house currently under construction. Next slide, please. And that is the house which is being built at the moment. Next slide, please. And that's looking from the corner of that site down towards the road again. The tarmac area, which you can see, is one of the potential sites, but is currently being occupied by, I think there's one caravan, but I think that from time to time there are other caravans there. Next slide, please. And we're back to the aerial shot. So what is before the committee is a review of an application which was submitted for the removal of condition 6 attached to planning permission 20-01319, which was so it's for the erection of a dwelling house and associated office studio at land southwest of Powmill Cottage. So condition 6 states, prior to the development hereby approved being completed or brought into use, all matters regarding access, car parking, road layout, design and specification, including the disposal of surface water, shall be in accordance with the standards required by the Council as Roads Authority. So the applicant's case, to summarise, condition 6 is linked to a roads construction consent of local development plan site E23 for up to 7 dwellings with associated Class 4 office units. It was obtained by a third party prior to the applicant purchasing this site in 2018. Scottish Government Circular 4/1998 provides 6 tests for planning conditions. Condition 6 is seen as failing to meet these tests, namely that the conditions are necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development to be permitted, enforceable, precise, and reasonable in all other respects. The failings may be summarised as follows. Regarding necessity, a single house does not need to be served by an adoptable standard road. The provision for the road to the west is not a necessary part of the approved development. The proposal would only be the 4th house, and the Scots Roads Development Guide allows for 5 houses to be served by a private house. Regarding relevance to the development permitted, the standard approved under the roads construction consent are not considered to be relevant to the scale of the permitted development, which could be served by a private road. Regarding enforceability, the access road is owned by a third party and out with the applicant's control. The applicant considers that in the event of non-compliance with the condition and the serving of a breach of condition notice, the Procurator Fiscal is unlikely to take further action. Regarding precision, the wording of the condition does not require any works to be carried out. It's considered that with the approval of the road construction consent, the condition has already been complied with fully. Regarding reasonableness, imposing the cost of the total works, estimated at some £350,000, on the applicant's development proposal without any prospect of him being reimbursed by others whose development would benefit from the upgraded road is seen as unreasonable. The condition is based on speculation that there will be further development and makes the approved development financially unviable. It's considered that there's no reasonable prospect of more than 5 development units being served by the road. It's considered that the council should have required a Section 75 agreement at the outset to have been entered into to ensure that responsibility for the road was shared. It's also considered that there was an opportunity to require a mechanism to ensure a shared contribution to the cost of the road and setting out site-specific requirements when allocating the site in the local development plan. The applicant has proposed that a Section 75 agreement is entered into concerning the upgrading of the section of his frontage onto the roadway. He's also willing to make a contribution to the improvement of the Bellmouth into the A977 and share the cost of improvement to the section of the road not fronted by proposed development. He anticipates that other owners, who are all subject to the same condition, would choose the alternative of such a Section 75 agreement because they have the same individual prospect of meeting the local cost of the roadworks. While it's recognised that the work would not be carried out in a single phase, the unimproved section of road to the east is adequate for his needs and for the level of development. Report of handling, to summarise the report of handling, the application site falls within a larger area allocation as an employment site within the local development plan. The access road, which is also part of the core path network, currently serves 3 houses, a caravan site and a working farm. While condition 6 doesn't mention the road's construction consent, its purpose is to ensure that the access is upgraded to adoptable standard. The condition has been part of all the numerous planning permissions for dwelling houses with associated office development accommodation since the initial improvement in 2003. In assessing the request for the deletion of condition 6, the report of handling is broadly cognizant of the applicant's previously stated views regarding adoptable standard requirement and number of dwellings involved, the terms of the National Roads Development Guide and the overall failure of the condition to meet the tests of Circular 4/1098, notably unreasonableness arising from the financial cost and ownership of the road by a third party. The site first received planning permission in 2003, and upgrading of the road to an adoptable standard has been a requirement since that time. The applicant's submission frequently refers to dwelling houses and the association policy guidance, whereas the LDP allocation is for an employment site, which allows for a residential element. In addition to traffic generated by the residential units, the employment use can be expected to generate additional traffic associated with visiting members of the public and employees. Consequently, the standard of access required is higher than it would be for a small group of houses. The applicant has suggested that each plot upgrades its own frontage. However, none of the other plot owners have contacted the council indicating support for this approach. It's noted that the planning permission for plots 1 and 3D have expired. Plot 2 is now a 5-berth caravan site. Plots 3A, 3B and 3C have live permissions with the same planning condition. The suggested approach would not include the track frontage of Poundmill Cottage, the section from the cottage to the public road, or the frontages of plots 1 and 3D. It's the officer's view that this suggestion does not provide a mechanism which should enable the track to be upgraded. It's noted that a lesser road specification is also envisaged. If the condition is deleted or amended to relate only to the frontage of the applicant's plot, the burden for the remainder would fall on the next plot. If that is treated in the same way, there would appear to be a strong possibility that the entire site would become developed without an appropriately upgraded access. Regarding financing and apportioning of costs, this is a civil matter between owners and developers and not a material planning consideration. So additional information which has arrived since the application was continued. The Communities Transport Planning arm of the Council on the 6th of October stated, delivering an upgrade to a small section of the vehicle access that does not connect with the public road network will not meet adoption standards. Any upgrade to the vehicle access not approved and monitored through the road construction consent process will not be maintained by Perth and Kinross Council and will remain a private matter. Some observations. One house of the 7 granted is under construction. There are now 3 houses which can be built under the consent. A development of up to 5 houses can be accessed according to Perth and Kinross's Transport Planning Service without a shared access road needing to be an adoptable standard, although as stated in the handling report, this relates to houses, not houses with an office or employment associated with them. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. I have a question. As I understand it, the applicant is looking to upgrade the road in front of his property, and he's also suggested contributing towards upgrading the Bellmouth. It could get complicated. I mean, presumably other properties will follow suit. The same idea to upgrade the frontage of each house, but getting all of them to contribute towards the Bellmouth could get complicated legally. Is that something we need to consider, or the offer? Or perhaps Mr. Elliott might come in that one as well.
I think that is something that the committee could reasonably consider, yes. As well as the Bellmouth, there are parts of the access road which won't pass a site that has a current planning permission. So even apart from the Bellmouth, there would be gaps in the upgrading of the road.
Sorry, if I could just come in. I think my understanding of the application is it seeks to remove the condition that requires, essentially is looking for the whole of the access road to be upgraded to adoptable standard by PKC and thereafter maintained by PKC under roads legislation. What it's seeking is to reduce the standard, not remove entirely, but reduce the standard to what is a private road. So that would mean it wouldn't be adopted by PKC. In terms of your point about the Bellmouth, it then opened the question as to whether you need anything in terms of the Bellmouth, because yes, perhaps a contribution towards upgrade to a private road standard, but it wouldn't be adopted. But in terms of the complexity, yes, I'm afraid there would be continuing difficulties with going for a section 75, which is what's suggested, because that would only be one and not the others. And there's no guarantee of success, and you would end up with the same issues with the Bellmouth as you currently have here. As much as I could say, I wouldn't be encouraging of a section 75 in relation to the Bellmouth.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, any questions?
Owns the road. Did they receive any proceeds of the sales of the sites off that road?
That's not information I'm party to, Councillor, and I couldn't find anything in the papers that said anything either way about that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, because the applicant we have here, Section 6 would have been applied to his house before he started to build, or possibly started to purchase. Would that be correct? Over.
If I understand you properly, I think that's correct. Yes. Yeah.
So he would have known that danger ahead, or quite a bit of expenditure involved in upgrading the road to adoptable standard, which was condition 6 that he wishes to delete.
Certainly, I would imagine anybody buying any of the plots would I would hope they would pick that up. If not, then a solicitor acting for them, I would hope would pick that up. So I can't speak for them because I don't know the answer to that one, but I would imagine that they would either pick that up themselves or be advised by a solicitor acting for them of that potential issue.
Yeah, because he's taking, well, with that condition 6 is quite a risk. If he did up the road to adoptable standard, whether he'd be able to recover that from the other properties to be built on that road or other sales that have presently taken place earlier. There's no way that can be imposed. He can not impose that if he did comply with the condition 6.
I would agree, Councillor. I think you're right. Yeah.
Councillor Waters.
Just, I'm not really sure I need much clarification on this, but basically, if as the applicant is suggesting, each property front is responsible for their own section, that still means there's no passing places or there's no guarantee passing places or anything of that nature. And the standard, there's no way of controlling the standard of road. Once if we were minded to accept his proposals, there's no way of controlling the standard of the road, and each of the 5 properties may just adopt a totally different standard. Is that correct?
I think you are correct, Councillor. Your point on passing places is correct. Unless each of the individual owners were to create a passing place in front of their own house, then yes, there wouldn't be any. And you're also right in saying that there'd be no control, that the council wouldn't be able to control the finish, the quality of construction, etc. of the road or the maintenance, I have to say.
Right, thank you. No more questions, convener.
Thank you, Councillor. I have no more questions. So members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Anderson?
I'm happy to proceed.
And Councillor Waters?
Happy to proceed.
I'm too happy to proceed, so I'll lead on this one. Obviously, this is a development within the local development plan. It's under E23, and by it being there, I'm assuming that we would like to see the site developed. By circumstance, we seem to be in a deadlock now with regard to the upgrading of this road, this track. Given the offer by the applicant, I'm inclined to agree to delete this condition. He has offered to upgrade the road in front of his property, obviously to a lower standard than council adopted standard, but at least to get it upgraded to a private access standard. I'm inclined to agree to this, to break the deadlock and allow this development to start. I think there would have to be some change of condition, some wording to ensure that he does do the work. But if we can find a consensus from other colleagues first of all and see what their thoughts are. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I would concur with the convener on this one. It's making a start. It's not getting the whole story done, but it's a way forward. There's many private roads in terrible states of repair, and quite a number of the occupants on that stretch of road in future, whether they agree or not, but it's a start, and hopefully others will agree the more modest specification on their part of the section of the road, not to ever be adopted by the council at that state, but as just to move forward.
And Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. I'm going to disagree. I think there may be a solution in here, but I don't think it's the one the applicant is coming up with. If there is a move, just to accept from a planning perspective that we're never going to achieve an adoptable road. then I would still prefer it to go back to the applicants and the owners of all the plots to come up with something that at least gets a consistent level or standard of road along the lane to ensure that the planning places, passing places are all done up. The whole road is upgraded to a certain level where just accepting what the applicant wants will not achieve that. From a planning perspective, it won't achieve what's required and what was set out within the LDP. Even if there is a need to sit and say this is never going to be an adopted road, I still think from a planning perspective there needs to be some kind of need or some kind of an agreement in there that gets it up to a certain level or certain standard of private road at this stage, and ensures there's some maintenance element to it as well going forward, and where a lot of that would be a civil element. I think as a planning authority we should be minded of that. So I will stick with the current officer's reasons for conditions on it, but just as a note that if the applicants did come forward with or all the applicants or some way of they work together to find some solution that was acceptable to give some consistency there. Thank you.
That we have a majority decision on this one, not consensus, but over to you.
Thank you, Convener. I think by 2-1 the review has been allowed. Just to be clear, that I think you said it yourself, Convener, that there'll be, I think it's likely it's an alternative condition is required because what is proposed is a private standard set out in the papers. Now, my understanding also the frontage of this property only. And also to be clear, you didn't say there would be no section 75 in relation to the Belmouth. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll now move on to the last paper today, which is number 5.2. And this too is an item which has been deferred previously by the body to do with the erection of a boundary wall, West Lodge Caravan Park at Comrie Crieff. So I can ask Mr. Burton if you could introduce this for us once again.
Thank you, Chair. Pardon me. To take you through the photographs first, these are photographs taken by my predecessor. So that you might see, and I've amended them slightly, so you might see bits of arrows in it, which just ignore them. So looking at the site, West Lodge Estate is on the outskirts of the settlement, on a section of A85 where it is very much a country road. The application site is a small part of the caravan site, and it's adjacent to what used to be the lodge, the gatehouse for Comrie Estate. Next slide, please. So you can see the site bounded in red there. It's an area to the front of the caravan site, between the road and the caravan site. The grey building immediately to the right of the application site is West Lodge, which is listed. Next slide, please. Have the next slide, please. Okay. All right. Okay. The upper red line is basically the line of the existing wall. Because the wall is attached to the listed gatehouse, the wall is also listed. Now, the original the application showed the new wall that the applicants wanted to construct being formed partly with some stone from the existing wall, which there wasn't to demolish. And the existing wall, the listed wall remains. So the new wall has been built with no stone from the original wall. I'll run through the rest of the paper while we wait. Oh, here we are. Now you can see the access that's been formed into the caravan site, and you can see there the new wall, which is to the front where the yellow arrow is pointed to, and the existing wall behind that, slightly higher, running along the front of the caravans. So the new wall curves round and takes in land which was previously a grass verge with trees. Next slide, please. And this is looking back from the other direction. On the right-hand side, you see the listed lodge and the garden of the lodge, and an access which takes you past the lodge and into the estate. You can see the new wall. It's the lighter colour wall with cars parked behind it, and you can see the older existing wall immediately to the front of the caravans. Next slide, please. That's looking along the new verge, which is gravel, and the new wall. You can see the car park is being used, and you can glimpse just on the right-hand side of the picture there the original wall. Next slide, please. Inside the car park, original listed wall to the left, new wall to the right, close to the road. Next slide, please. And that is the listed wall. You can, I think you can make out there that it's attached to the gatehouse at its far end, and as you can see, it is largely intact. Next slide, please. There's been a gap cut into that wall to form an access from between the car park and the caravan park. That area between the two posts is the only change that's taken place to the listed wall at the moment. Next slide, please. And that's back to the beginning, right? So the applicant has erected a new boundary wall between the existing boundary wall and the main road at the front of the caravan park. The area between the two walls is now marked out as a car park for use of visitors. The original application proposed removing the existing boundary wall and reusing the stone from that to build a new wall, but as can be seen from the pictures, the applicant has now built the new wall without using any stone from the original wall, which currently remains in place. It's proposed to retain a 6-metre section of the wall close to the West Lodge. The original wall is connected to West Lodge, a listed building, so has listed status. This is the second time this review has been brought to the LRB. When it was first presented in June this year, it was continued to obtain further information on the applicant on whether they wish to demolish the existing wall, having regard to the configuration of both the new and existing walls at the moment, and clarification as to whether Transport Scotland has received and is content with the transport information apparently submitted on the applicant's behalf. Following receipt of all information and responses, the applicant to be brought back to a future meeting of the local review body. To summarise the applicant's case, the applicant recently purchased the caravan park and is keen to carry out improvements. The proposals submitted are designed to respect the setting of the original wall and the lodge building and to accommodate the core path which runs past the West Lodge. The only issue remaining is whether the proposals impact adversely on the listed building. To summarise the report of handling, Policy 27B of the Local Development Plan, demolition of listed buildings, is relevant. Prior to the work which has been carried out, the caravan was separated from the A85 by a frontage of grass and mature trees. The loss of the planting strip and the wall which is attached to the lodge will have an adverse impact on the character and visual amenity of the caravan park, contrary to the placemaking policies 1A and 1B. The loss of the verge and erection of a new boundary wall is also contrary to Policy 60B of the LDP, which requires applicants to consider the potential impact of proposals on the local and strategic transport network and to design changes for the safety and convenience of all potential users. There were no public representations received to the application. Material considerations. The wall which is proposed for removal is listed, so Policy 27B of the local development plan is a material consideration. Placemaking policies 1A and 1B are also material, as is policy 60B, which, as said above, seeks to ensure that new developments do not adversely affect road users, including pedestrians. In this respect, the view of Transport Scotland is relevant. Transport Scotland submitted a holding response and requested further information on the proposal's impact on the A85. So new information. The review has continued to obtain information on whether the intention is still to demolish the listed wall and for clarification on Transport Scotland's view on the proposals. Members will see on pages 371 to 378 the additional information that has been received from Transport Scotland and the applicant. The original proposal to retain a 6-metre section of the wall and to demolish the rest of the wall remains. It's clear from Transport Scotland's response, which you can see on page 375, that fundamental issues regarding potential safety issues with the new junction that has been formed remain. In particular, the applicant has been asked to demonstrate that the new wall does not impede visibility from either access. This is normally agreed before an application is determined, as it could lead to a redesign of the proposal or even its refusal. Observations on the review. The proposal has been partly implemented. The applicant looked to reuse elements of the listed wall in the construction of the new wall. This has not happened, and the new wall is clearly different in colour and texture to the original wall. The demolition of the wall was also refused under listed building consent, which was applied for at the same time as the application, which is subject to this review. The route to appeal against the listed building consent refusal is to the Government's Planning and Environmental Appeals Division. No appeal was lodged, so that refusal stands. Thank you, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Councillor Waters, any questions?
Thank you, convener. Just on the road restraint risk assessment process from Transport Scotland. Just a little bit of explanation, the importance of this or what it's there to achieve, and possibly from Mr. Elliott's perspective. And I know the applicant put in a request to add this as a condition, but you know, can the really application proceed at any level without that being known or in place? Thank you.
It's this sort of thing is not really normally applied as a condition, and the reason for that is it could be fundamental. It could be fundamental to the application. It could lead to the application being refused if it's not possible to agree a visibility display that Transport Scotland are happy with on the trunk road, or it could lead to a redesign of the proposal, which is more likely, I have to say, but it's not normally attached as a condition for that reason.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Looking at the photograph we have in front of us, are there two entrances to the caravan site? I see the one above the A, which is seemingly A entrance, and there'll be one to the right, which will be into the kind of new car parking area. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councillor. The access, which is by the lodge, gives access to the lodge and to the estate behind it. The access near the A of the A85 gives access to the caravan park for caravans being brought into it and leaving it, and also for cars of people who have caravans there. So visitors would enter from the other access, the access to the lodge, to use the car park there, but they wouldn't access the entire caravan park from there.
Yeah, just probably more background knowledge, but it's not a touring caravan park. It looks like static caravans on most of the site. I'm just wondering how much business comes in and out of that site. You know, pulling a caravan behind them or going in. Over.
I think you're correct, Councillor. I think that it is at the moment more a static caravan site than a touring caravan site. The new owners, however, have been quite active in changing the caravan park, and we don't know what the future use of the caravan park will be, whether it will remain mainly static or whether there will be an element of for touring caravans.
I'm not sure if I understood you correctly. You're saying that listed building consent was refused to remove the old wall, but possibly there was no allowance for the new wall along the main road to be rebuilt with that material. Well, they refused to remove the listed wall. Is that correct?
That's correct. Listed building consent was refused. The application for the new wall was also refused, which means which if you put the two together, it makes sense.
Yeah. So the wall that's been built along the roadside is, from our point of view, that because the planners had hoped to have been built with the stone from the listed wall. It seems to be two people fighting against each other on this one. But the road safety aspect is the main concern I have. It's on the bends in the road, and Transport Scotland have their quays, probably view lines, etc. That's one I'm concerned about.
Just to clarify in the first point, Councillor, it was the applicant who was suggesting using some of the stone from the existing wall in the construction of the new wall. That wasn't something that the planners were asking for.
I have no questions myself, Mr. Burton. So, members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor. Or do we require more information? Councillor Waters?
Happy to proceed, convener.
And Councillor Ann?
Happy to proceed.
And I too am happy to proceed. And as I was on the original body, I'll lead off on this one again. The original review body, which assessed this, obviously had two thoughts in mind. The first one was to get information from Transport Scotland on their view on this, and whatever that was passed back to our own transport planning. And the second issue was the wall. I think the thoughts of the body last time was that the way things have been constructed now was that the existing wall formed a natural barrier between the caravan park and the new car park at the front, and that it would be an idea to retain that, given that there was a pedestrian access already created. It now seems that the applicants do still wish to remove this wall, which obviously is an issue which has come up on the refusal, and given it's a listed monument, I feel that I would have to concur with the decision of the planners that that shouldn't be removed. But I too have concerns about road safety here. And given that the matter needs to be considered by Transport Scotland, which is a statutory body, I think that's another reason for refusal. Now, I think perhaps something else should be added to this, Mr. Elliott. But before we go that far, perhaps we should ask for my two colleagues for their views. So, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Yes, no, I think you've summed it up quite well, actually. So I agree fully that and especially with the Transport Scotland side, we do need to see that without any question before it. But fully agree.
And Councillor Anderson.
I'm happy on that basis to proceed.
Fine, thank you very much. So we have a consensus with Mr. Elliott. But as I said, I think there should be something mentioned here about about the fact that we need information from or should have been information from Transport Scotland. Do you want me to give you some thoughts here, or?
Unless you have something in mind. Just
Well, I thought,
bear with me a second.
Okay, fine.
Page 349 is the
the
reason for refusal,
that's
and I
correct.
think unanimously you've agreed to go by that reason. And from my understanding, you want to add a second reason in relation to road safety.
I think we should do, because obviously we all agree that Transport Scotland should be involved here to give their assessment once they have the right information. So I was thinking of something on the lines of the policy is contrary to policy 60B of the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2019, as the proposal is adjacent to the 885 trunk road, and it has not been demonstrated that the proposal is acceptable to Transport Scotland and does not adversely impact on road safety. Something along those lines. I mean, obviously you might want to polish it a little bit, Mr. Elliott, given your legal mind, but I think that sums it up. If my colleagues are agreeable to that, generally, yeah. They're both nodding, Mr. Elliott, so I think we're on the right lines there.
I think how that convener is refused in terms of the grounded refusal by the appointed officer, and secondly, additional refusal proposal contrary to policy 60B or Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2 2019, as the proposal is adjacent to the 885 trunk road and it's not been demonstrated proposal is acceptable to Transport Scotland and does not adversely impact on road safety.
That's great.
Okay, yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Members, that then brings us to the end of today's local review body. All it leaves me to do is to thank you both for being with me and to thank obviously Mr. Burton and Mr. Elliott Guild for their input today. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one next month. Thank you.